Greetings, everybody. I am your host, Trev. I hope you are doing well wherever you are. If you are new to the channel, welcome. This is something very new for the channel, in fact. So the gist of this is I read a cold read, a story. So you guys can kick back and close your eyes and imagine what it's going to be like and things like that. But it is something brand new for the channel, very first time that I'm doing it. So let me know if it works by dropping a comment below, and we'll see what we can do. Anything that you think that we should concentrate on or do to better it, then please do let me know. The story is by Selwyn. Beck. He's an unpublished writer. And the reason why he approached me was my idea to do this sort of thing, but Selwyn said that he's an unpublished writer and he wanted to know if I knew any publishers. Unfortunately, I don't for material work, but I said to him, well, why don't we do this? Do something a little bit different and see what happens, see what comes of it. Someone might hear it and go, hey, this sounds like this could be a pretty good writer or author or short story person or whatever. And all the images in the background that you see are just purely not reference to the story in any way whatsoever, and if it does reference to this story, it's absolutely by luck. And thank you to Pexel for allowing me to use the images. They are free to use. Anybody can use them. Anyway, it is fiction. A dark, non-religious, twisted inference of that old saying. A somber depiction of an encounter between humans and an ethereal spirit. Fisher of Men, Chapter 1. Detective Inspector Rankin moved through the shabby little apartment, his footsteps echoing in the dimly lit space. He was engulfed in a sullen mood, his face etched with frustration as he cast a glare at his partner, Detective Stevens. The presence of Stevens only served to irritate him further. Stevens had managed to climb the ranks by virtue of his skill at ingratiating himself with the higher-ups, always eager to please management and taking credit for the work of others. Rankin, on the other hand, was a relic of the old school, a veritable dinosaur from a bygone era. This stark contrast made it difficult for Rankin to warm up to Stevens or trust him. There was an underlying tension, a constant game of cat and mouse between them, with Stevens constantly lurking in the shadows, ready to seize any opportunity. Rankin chose to ignore Stevens, giving him the freedom to do as he pleased. He simply didn't care enough to engage with his partner. Retirement was just a month away for Rankin, and he resented the chief for assigning him to this case. He had no desire to have another unsolved homicide tarnishing his record. The task at hand was to locate the missing barman, who had seemingly vanished from the locked premises. However, finding him proved to be a challenging endeavor. Nobody seemed to know his real name, as the bar owner, Bob, had never bothered to verify the barman's personal details. He was known simply as Stu. The apartment they were searching belonged to Bob, who had allowed Stu to reside there as part of their wage agreement. With only this name Stu and a description that matched half the male population of the city, their leads quickly turned into dead ends. Yet, the chief stubbornly believed that the barman was the prime suspect, and finding him would unravel the entire crime. Detective Rankin, however, held a different opinion. He believed that the barman may have witnessed the crime and met a similar fate, possibly becoming another victim. He doubted they would find the barman, let alone find him alive. This was the heart of Rankin's concerns. He feared that what appeared to be a missing persons case was in fact a homicide. Secretly, he hoped the barman would remain missing until after his retirement. Although he was only meant to assist with the missing persons case, he dreaded being pulled into the murder investigation of the other victim as well. He wanted no part of it. His plan had been to coast through the remaining weeks of his career, grabbing his pension and embracing the peaceful sanctuary of retirement. He stood by the curtain and glared out the grimy window as the weak early morning sun tried to brighten up the overcast skies. Rankin let his partner have full control of the investigation. He did not care to be of any assistance. Detective Stevens had been recently promoted as a detective and was therefore full of vim and vigor, doing his best to make his mark. He therefore welcomed the chance of leading the investigation of the missing barman. Stevens continued his meticulous note-taking while Rankin stood there, his cigarette dangling between his fingers, lost in thought. The details of the gruesome homicide at the bar played over and over in Rankin's mind. It was a shocking scene, one that had even caused the responding officer to lose control and vomit uncontrollably. The police had swiftly imposed a media blackout, not wanting to incite panic among the public. The discovery of a disarray of human organs at the bar had led them to this very apartment. It was a puzzle that left them stumped, as finding a dead body with its organs scattered across a table was a whole new level of sadistic evil. During the autopsy, they had made a disturbing revelation. The organs didn't belong to the cadaver found alongside them. The body at the bar presented another enigma. There was no visible signs of physical violence, no leads from DNA analysis, and no murder weapon. Rankin shook his head, exhaling a cloud of smoke. It was going to be a long and challenging day. Casually stomping out his cigarette on the filthy kitchen floor, Rankin surveyed the chaotic surroundings. It was evident that the barman led an extremely untidy life. Dirty clothes were strewn across the floor, and the overflowing garbage can emitted a putrid stench. The kitchen sink was piled high with unwashed dishes, and the stove bore the remnants of an unappetizing and long-forgotten meal. The blocked toilet and grimy shower were better left untouched. The entire apartment exuded the unmistakable odor of rotting trash and stale tobacco. Rankin was repulsed by the deplorable conditions in which people chose to live. Meanwhile, Stevens had stumbled upon a hidden stash of porn magazines under the bed, flipping through them with a smirk on his face. The temptation to leave Stevens to his own devices and retreat to the car for a much-needed drink was almost overwhelming for Rankin. He just wanted to escape from it all. However, his attention was abruptly caught by a small, flashing light on the laptop sitting on the desk. Irritated that Stevens had overlooked it, Rankin slipped on a pair of surgical gloves and cautiously approached the cluttered desk. Clearing away the mess, he gingerly opened the partially closed lid of the laptop. Squinting at the text before him, he let out an annoyed sigh and retrieved his spectacles from his pocket. Leaning forward, he started to read the Word document spread out before him. As he delved into the text, a chilling realization washed over him, causing cold sweat to trickle down his brow. The contents of the document sent shivers down his spine, hinting at a dark and twisted truth that he was about to uncover. Chapter 2. I am the barman here at Bob's Bar on the corner of Jefferson Street. Nestled on the bustling intersection, this decrepit old bar stands as a nostalgic relic, preserving the essence of bygone eras. The bar, with its weathered exterior and worn-out facade, carries an air of history and charm. Inside, the dimly lit space exudes a cozy yet somewhat dilapidated atmosphere, with creaking wooden floorboards and vintage furniture that has seen better days. The walls are adorned with faded photographs reminiscent of patrons from a different time, their stories and laughter etched into the very essence of the place. Despite its worn appearance, the bar has an undeniable allure. The scent of aged whiskey and the clinking of glasses fill the air, creating an ambience that is both inviting and mysterious. Regulars who have frequented this establishment for years find solace in the bar's familiarity and the camaraderie it fosters among its patrons. Bob had inherited the bar from his father 30 years ago when the place was still popular. He had made a veritable fortune until the economic downturn hit and people started flocking to newer, trendier establishments. Despite the decline in customers, Bob refused to give up on his father's legacy and continued to run the bar with unwavering determination, albeit at a loss. As the rain intensified outside, the atmosphere inside the bar became even more somber. The dimly lit room was adorned with vintage beer signs and worn-out bar stools, bearing witness to countless conversations and moments shared over the years. The jukebox in the corner played melancholic tunes, adding to the overall gloom of the night. I took a moment to glance at the clock on the wall. It was almost midnight, and there seemed to be no sign of the rain letting up. I couldn't help but wonder what Bob was doing at that moment. He was probably at home, anxiously awaiting the nightly report of the day's earnings. I knew he would be disappointed when he learned about the lackluster turnout. The few remaining customers in the bar seemed lost in their own thoughts, seeking solace from their daily struggles. The couple sipping their cheap wine appeared to be engrossed in a deep conversation, their faces reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and hope. They were probably discussing their dreams and aspirations, seeking comfort in each other's company. Old Mr. Tyler, a regular fixture at the bar, sat slouched over the counter. He was a relic from the bar's heyday, and his weathered face told a story of life filled with both triumphs and regrets. He often reminisced about the glory days when the bar bustled with laughter and merriment. Now, he was a constant reminder of what the bar had lost. The sound of rain hitting the roof and the occasional car passing by became a monotonous backdrop to my thoughts. I absent-mindedly stubbed out my cigarette and wandered over to the worn-out wooden bar where Bob usually stood. I was lucky to have landed this job, even though it meant working a 14-hour shift daily with no breaks. But I did not mind the long hours since the bar only kept me busy at night when the regulars showed up. During the day it was quiet with very little to no customers, which suited me fine, for it gave me lots of time trying to imagine a new story, of developing a plot or character. It was not the best of jobs, but it was all I had to support myself with. Times were tough. The pay sucked, but the job at least included a crappy little apartment, which took care of my homeless state. The apartment was a real dive though, but it was better than sleeping on the streets for sure. My name is Stu. Well, not really, but that's the name I am currently using. I don't like giving out personal details, and Bob, the owner, did not really ask much questions about my background either. He simply hired me on the spot. I was glad for that, since I wanted to remain off the radar, especially from the police. I sometimes made some extra cash by overcharging customers when they got real drunk. Don't judge me. A man's got to do what a man's got to do. I had no family, and I had been living mostly on the streets, fending for myself as best I could. My mama had left when I was a little boy, so I don't have much of a memory of her. Growing up in a trailer with my drunken old man was rough. I endured it for as long as I could before running away. I've not seen him since, and that's okay. I never needed him. I had no possessions and owned nothing except my laptop and some items of clothing. Yeah, well, alright, you got me. I stole the damn laptop, okay? So there. I admitted it. And I raided someone's laundry and got myself some clothes, so sue me. The damn city has gone to hell in a basket. Drugs, unemployment, homelessness, and the government. Well, they just don't give a shit. It's dog eats dog out there. So can you blame me? Since I had no need of friends, also meant I had no need of a cell phone. The few cell phones I usually acquired periodically from the drunken sods were hastily sold to increase my cash flow. So I was basically off the grid with no digital footprint, which really suited me just fine too. I don't want no big brother watching me every move. No siree. I chose to be single and don't have time for a girlfriend. They're just trouble on legs. More trouble when they allowed you entrance between those legs, so no thank you. Being single is a blessing of sorts, except on the lonely nights when all I had was my imagination and my right hand for comfort. Miss Palm and her 5 daughters gave me the best of pleasure without any of the grief. As I stood behind the bar, wiping down the counter for the 100th time that night, couldn't help but wonder if this was all my life had become. I had dreams once of becoming a writer, or maybe even a journalist, but those dreams had long since faded away. Now I just lived day to day, trying to survive in a world that didn't seem to care about me or anyone else. But I still dream of becoming an aspiring writer. Wanted so bad to make it big, to be somebody. I had faced so many heartbreaks of numerous repeated rejections, but I kept on. One day, soon, I will make the big time. I know I have what it takes to be an acclaimed author. As for editors and publishers, what do they know? I knew deep down in my soul that I would be famous one day. I just needed more time. I believed it with all of my being. Lived each day in acceptation of it becoming a reality. One day soon. A lucky break would do wonders for me, though. For now, all I could do was wish. But at the moment, I was in the throes of writer's block, which did nothing to help my current state of depression. For once, I wish I could sell my soul, make a deal with the devil. Like they say, was it even possible? Just imagine the possibilities. I mulled that thought over in my brain, allowing it to tease me with its promise. For a moment longer, I let my mind envision what I would do. What I would all do once I achieved fame. I could get a home of my own, a fancy car, perhaps even a vacation. I savored that thought a while longer, just innocently wishing it could somehow come true. Oh well, a man can dream, can't he? I suddenly snapped out of my reverie and stared at my grimy surroundings. What a letdown. My dream as an acclaimed author vanished fast, along with my desire for fame and fortune. My future looked very bleak indeed. I pondered a bit more at the sad state of my life, sickened by the realization of the contrast between its cold reality and my lofty, sweet dreams. The sound of the door opening snapped me out of my thoughts, and I looked up to see the tipsy couple exiting the bar. Thank the Lord, one more patron left. I hurried over, grabbed their glasses, and wiped the table. I took the glasses to the sink and gave it a quick rinse, and then took my time drying the glasses till they shone like new. I stacked the glasses away and hung the cloth over my shoulder, and then proceeded to light up another cigarette. I spent my nights working my shift in a foul mood as I pondered my very dark future. I had not shown the slightest interest in the patrons, preferring to bask in my miserable solitude. Rather. Except, of course, when one of them presented themselves for a little cash donation. I did not make friends at all, as I preferred being a loner. The patrons soon learned to leave me alone, ignored me really only until they needed a drink. Most nights passed relatively quickly, especially so when the place was crowded. But not tonight. The place was nearly deserted. The incessant rain had driven away the customers. The usual hookers had turned up earlier but had left in disgust at the sight of the empty bar. I lit another cigarette and settled back, just waiting out the last hour of my shift to complete. I kept myself busy by thumbing through the pages of a tattered magazine, patiently waiting for the time to pass. My eyes caught a report regarding some weird deaths in another city. The report said that the Coast Guard had encountered a fishing trawler with its entire crew dead. Evidently, the coroner had discovered upon examination that none of the bodies had any organs. I could not continue reading the outlandish crap any further and shook my head in amazement. How could anyone believe this stupid hoax? How could this be deemed newsworthy? I shook my head in amazement and wondered where people came up with these fake stories. I skipped over it. The fake news was too disgusting for my refined palate, and it boggled my mind that people would even buy the damn magazine, let alone read it. It was disheartening to realize that fake news were the top stories in the magazines today, but evidently a lot of people believed the story, claiming it to be some monster or demon. Even the church had rallied against the so-called demon, calling for a vigil of fervent prayers. Trust the church to get in on the act. I stubbed out my cigarette and looked up to see if the old geezer had finished his beer yet. I tossed the magazine aside in disgust and stared over at the last remaining customer. Old man Tyler, silently nursing the last few dregs of his beer. I wish the old fart would just hurry it along and get lost. I glanced at the clock and was glad to see it was 20 minutes to closing time. Soon my shift will be over. I could hardly wait to run out the door to my shabby little apartment. Not long to go now. I stared out the window and noticed that it had stopped raining, although the clouds still hung dark and foreboding in the night sky. I hoped it did not rain again, since I did not relish getting soaked on my way home. I watched old man Tyler for a while, hoping that he would just finish the damn beer already. The cigarette smoke hung heavy in the darkened room, adding to the cloying stench of cheap perfume and stale liquor. I huddled behind the bar counter and breathed a sigh of relief as old man Tyler finally shuffled toward the exit. I was glad that the bar was finally deserted. All that remained was a few more chores for me to do. I gathered up his empty glass and hurriedly washed and dried it. I then emptied the ashtrays and rubbed the bar counter clean. I turned the TV off and locked up the liquor cabinets and fridges. I turned to the cash register and quickly tallied the night's meager takings. Bob, the owner, was not going to be happy. Bob hated it when business was slow and would get mean and angry. I quickly moved to the front door and locked up before heading to the restrooms. A sudden faint whiff of the ocean assailed my nostrils. How weird. I stopped and looked around me, trying to locate the source of the smell. I sniffed the air again. There was no mistaking that salty sea breeze scent. But the place was empty and rather eerily quiet. I shrugged and thought I must be crazy, since the ocean was roughly 100 miles away. I continued on my way to the restrooms. Mercifully, the stalls were in a clean state, so I quickly flushed the toilets and dropped some J's fluid in the men's urinal. I then gathered up the broom and dustpan and headed back to the bar. Glancing again at the clock, I noted that I still had 10 minutes left on my shift. Just enough time to give the floors a quick sweep, and my shift would be done. Thank God. Chapter 3. I walked toward the rear of the bar and suddenly froze in my tracks. There at the far corner was another man still sitting. I had not seen him before, and I stood there, trying to figure out when he had arrived. I was certain that old man Tyler was the last patron. I walked tentatively toward him, eyeing him suspiciously. I'd never seen this man before in my life. He was dressed in a faded yellow oilskin with a dull green polo neck jersey. What the heck was a fisherman doing here, 100 miles away from the sea? His craggy face was framed by a nicotine-stained beard. His low-brimmed hat hid his face in shadow, so I could not make out his features clearly, but that moment I had briefly seen his blue-grey eyes that seemed to twinkle in the dim lights of the bar. A cold fear seemed to grip at me. Those eyes bored through me, as if searching out my inner thoughts, my hope, dreams, and fears, staring deep down into my very soul. His piercing gaze sent an icy shiver cascading down my spine, while every hair on my body bristled with an urgent instinct to flee. He seemed normal, much like any fisherman would seem, but there was something strange, something not right about him. I had this premonition, a sense of instinctive mistrust and fear for him. It then suddenly dawned on me that he was the source of the sea smell. What worried me more was how he had seemingly simply appeared inside the bar. I was damn sure that the bar was empty when I had locked the doors earlier. Who was this stranger? When had he arrived? I wanted to simply run out the door. I just felt the urgent need to get away from him. But I could not leave while he was in the bar, for I was responsible for the place. I needed the stranger to leave as soon as possible, but had to ensure that I did not cause a scene. I made a show of the broom, indicating that the bar was in effect closed, but the man simply stared at me as if daring me to tell him to leave. I knew I could not do so. Bob would have me out of my ear if I turned a customer away. So I resigned myself to the task of serving the stranger and approaching him directly. I would be humble, so I put on a fake smile, all for the sake of keeping my damn job. He smirked coldly at me and indicated for me to sit down. I felt as if commanded to do so, and shockingly found myself sitting down rather obediently. I felt strange and very afraid. I could not recall walking to his table. How did I get there so quickly? Then I noticed the broom and scoop lying on the floor, and realized that I had no memory of dropping it there, nor could I recall hearing it fall. My brain seemed to quit on me. I sat and stared expectantly at the man sitting opposite me. A sudden cold fear enveloped me, paralyzing me into a further submission. I could not move, could not even think. I was helpless and hopelessly lost. I started to tremble uncontrollably as my nose was assailed by the putrid smell that now emanated from the strange man. Gone was the fresh sea breeze smell of earlier, replaced now by what smelled like a scorched flesh. Not the sweet pleasant smell of barbecue, no, it smelled of something disgusting, something horrible. He grinned at me and nodded, gloating at my obvious helplessness to resist him. He cleared his throat and then spoke in a rather low, authoritative tone. I gagged at the smell of his stink breath. There is still 10 minutes of your shift left. He glared mockingly at me. That's just enough time for your claim to fame, eh? He then smiled and continued. Oh, no matter, you cannot answer actually, you can do nothing but listen to me. He then roared with laughter at his own little joke and then continued speaking. Ah, so you wish to be a famous author, he said mockingly as he continued. You should know that words have consequences. I could only stare back at him, completely speechless. Well, to that end I shall be your muse. Soon you shall be famous. In fact, that electronic device of yours at your apartment is processing everything furiously as we speak. My brain reached overload with all the questions flooding in, suspicions and fear clouded my ability to think straight. I was trying to understand what the stranger meant. How did he know I was a writer? What did he mean about my laptop being busy processing? Processing what? How did he know anything about me? Who was he? Where did he come from and what did he want from me? Fear coursed through me as all my questions remained unanswered. The stranger sighed and continued, unabated. What is that old saying you people use? Oh, wait. Yeah, I got it. Ye of little faith. The stranger burst out in a fit of laughter as he eyed my discomfort before continuing with his soliloquy. Oh, boy. Soliloquy. How do we say that? Soliloquy? Soliloquy? Wow. Yeah. Soliloquy. Soliloquy. Wow. Big word. That's a big soliloquy. Soliloquy. There we go. Yeah, you learn something new every day. Okay. The stranger burst out in a fit of laughter as he eyed my discomfort before continuing with his soliloquy. You read the article in the magazine, but you tossed it aside in belief. You people give names to things you do not understand. So arrogant. That monster demon is so very real, for I am that so-called demon. My flesh crawled with fear as I listened to the stranger. I could do nothing but sit there like a lifeless puppet. I was completely and utterly under his control, helpless against his power. He continued speaking to me. Oh, how I detest being here, stuck in this primitive state, your realm of perpetual evil. Your kind has never extended beyond your basic cruelty, greed, and depravity, clinging instead to your fake religious cults, destroying each other in the name of your false gods. He glared at me and shook his head in disgust. I just stared at him, too afraid, so helpless and afraid. The old seaman continued speaking, spittle flying disgustingly from his mouth. You worship your materialistic acquisitions through your never-ending quest of barbaric cruelty. You lust for yet even more riches, more power, and you willingly destroy each other as well as your very own planet without the slightest compunction. Man. He became more menacing and his skin seemed to be turning a shade darker. I could see what looked like tiny plumes of smoke rising from his head and arms. I stared in abject terror and disbelief as his skin seemed to sizzle with faint, spluttering, bubbling little popping sounds that accompanied this ghastly scene. My nostrils flared at the pungent smell of burnt flesh that started to pervade through the place. I started shaking uncontrollably, but my plight had no effect on the stranger. There was no pity to be found within those soulless eyes of his. I stared fearfully at him as he continued with his diatribe. Your people will in time determine incorrectly that I came from the sea, but that is not my true origin. For I am not of this world. What you deem as evil is simply my way of surviving as I struggle to get back home. I shuffled about uncontrollably in a frantic effort to try and stand up. I just knew I had to do something. I had to get away. I wanted to run, but could not move a muscle. I was being held down by some powerful unknown force. Terror coursed through my body and spurred me on to escape, but my primal instinct to flee was drastically curtailed. I was trapped like an animal, completely within the power of this fearful stranger. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I felt my own urine soak my trousers. I groaned and clenched my butt tightly as I felt my bowels start to loosen too. The stranger ignored my futile struggles and continued with his disturbing monologue. Trapped in this vile lower dimension would prove fatal unless I adapted to overcome it. To survive, I must seek temporary shelter within a third-dimensional body, but the puny human body starts to cook away after a short period of time, so it is necessity to keep changing bodies, since the organs perish rather more quickly, and I have no use for it either. It is simply ejected out. The human body suffers for a little while as it feels its organs being disposed of. The stranger smiled malevolently at me before continuing sharing the ghastly details I most definitely did not appreciate hearing. I had firstly survived by using the larger creatures of the sea as a host. This ended when I became trapped in one of the fishermen's nets. I was hauled aboard, and for the next few months I moved from one human vessel to another until there were no more humans alive left aboard the ship. I left the ship and headed for the shore, the bright city lights calling out to me. The stranger stopped and watched me intently, as if ensuring that I understood. I stared back into its empty eyes as my heart pounded frantically in my chest. Random thoughts raced through my mind, but I could not seem to gather a single coherent thought. Could not come up with a course of action. Suddenly, in a moment of clarity, my thoughts zoned in on religion. In desperation, I tried again to focus my mind, trying to recall a biblical passage, a prayer. Suddenly, as if by a miracle, Psalm 23 jumped in my mind. The Lord is my shepherd. And then my mind simply went blank. I could not recall the psalm at all. My mind raced, trying to remember the Bible, to recall some church service I had last attended so long ago. But for some reason, I could not recall the words, could not say them out loud. It was as if my brain had frozen, my mouth gagged shut. I choked with tears. All I could hear was the sound of my weak, incoherent, pitiful mumbling. I was much like a mute idiot, shaking fearfully in my chair. Then I recalled a name. That name. I felt hopeful, felt as if I had finally found some defense, some salvation. But when I tried to utter it, believing the sound of that name would render this monster powerless over me, I choked and gagged, the name silenced instantly before I could utter it. I tried as hard as I could, but could not call the name out of the Lord. I seemed to choke on the very name, and I had hoped would save me. But it was only for a nanosecond before my mind went completely blank. His power over me, complete and final. All I could do was to stare at the stranger, terrified silence. The stranger grinned at me and shook his head as he reprimanded me coldly. Even in your final moments, you still cling to your silly, worthless mumbo-jumbo. I groaned and slumped back in defeat. It dawned on me that I could not escape, could do nothing to help myself. I had never felt so alone, so very afraid. He then smiled malevolently at me and leaned back against the backrest of the booth. I could do nothing but stare at his soulless eyes in abject horror. The stranger seemed to shudder slightly, the body heaving at the force struggling from within it. He glanced up at the clock and then looked at me and softly continued talking. Your little story's finished, your claim to fame assured. It is time. The stranger stared at me for a short while, a crude grin on his wizened face. I was dazed, as if in a dream, silently awaiting the inevitable, like a lamb to the slaughter. The room is covered in a swirling, smoky, ghastly aroma of burnt flesh. The stranger trembles slightly, his eyes seemingly getting inordinately larger in his head. His body starts convulsing, shaking, and stuttering, much like a broken rag doll. In that instant, I knew my ghastly fate. The stranger heaved his chest forward, and I watched in fear as a huge, silvery grey ethereal shape broke free from within the stranger. It hovered malevolently in front of me for an instant, as if appraising my suitability. Being unable to do anything but stare at this thing in abject horror and fascination. I flinched as I caught a glimpse of the lifeless body of the fisherman as it slumped over to the side. I caught a sudden movement, and in an instant the shape penetrated my body forcefully. I screamed out in pain as the shape entered my very being, taking over my body as its new, temporary abode. I felt a deep, intense searing pain coursing through my entire body, and I watched in horror as the creature inside me vomited my organs out onto the table before me. And then mercifully, the blackest darkness enveloped me. The end. By Selwyn Beck, everybody. Fisher of Men. What a great title. I haven't read the story. I thought it was going to be a femme fatale or something like that, but yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that. Hopefully you guys did too. There's a couple of things that I did get wrong. Some of the text before me didn't quite read it out properly, but there we go, not too bad. Short story by Selwyn Beck, Fisher of Men, and appreciate Selwyn reaching out and agreeing for me to do this. We're just trying to see if we can maybe a publisher pick him up or something like that or whatever. Whatever happens. If you like this content, please consider hitting like and subscribing to the channel. It is a free way to show support, and it is greatly appreciated. We aim to do some more at some point. I'm not sure when. There's a couple of things that I kind of threw out was reading crime reports and that sort of thing by serial killers and their history of that and their cases and how they got caught and all that sort of thing. I'm not sure how that would work, but it's a thought at least. But this is where we're starting for now. And I know Selwyn actually has, I think, about another three books. Whether they short or full books, I'm not too sure. And I think there's a couple of full books. But we're starting off with this one. So, well, I hope you guys appreciate that. And get into our Discord and say hi to Selwyn. Silver Shadow, I believe, is his Discord name. So, by all means, please do get in touch and come say hi. And again, if you like this content, drop a few comments below and, we'll try and make it better, a little bit smoother, and maybe some different images in the background that are more suited to the story. But the whole point of doing it this way is that it's a cold read. I haven't read it before, and that's what I'm aiming to do. But anyway, yes, there we go, guys. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to Selwyn Beck, Fisher of Men. Cheers, everybody.